People have been asking me to make a video on statues for a very long time, but the truth is there's someone in my crew that's just better than me at making them, and that's pearlescentmoon here. What are you looking at? Alright, my artist was busy so I had to draw the picture of Pearl myself. Art isn't my strong suit, and neither is statues, so without further ado, let's get straight into it. So I've got a bunch of statues here today, and some of them I will give you an example of where you could use them as well as the design itself. First up we have a cute little dragon. Pearl has a little thing for these tiny serpents, and they do look pretty good, and I'm going to go over statue design as we go through these examples and kind of point out why they work. And the main thing is the use of slabs and staircases. You'll notice that most of these statues are fairly small in size, and that's because I didn't want to make anything that would scare people away from attempting a statue. They're fairly easy, you just need to be willing to try and get some very intricate angles. Much like this little swan type thing here, it's a very simple build. It's just using each slab or staircase very effectively. This is a cool witch. Now this obviously is a bit more complicated than the little stone bird thing, and you will need to practice before you kind of get to that stage, but it's all about the shape and the intricacies here. It's even got a bit of magic coming out of the wand. Use of different kinds of blocks, such as the cobblestone and the stone brick, allow you to break up parts of the build, and this is an example of where it could be used. Imagine that this stump was in the middle of a forest or a magic forest or something like that. You could put it here just as a decoration. Statues are great for atmosphere. This one on the right is an example using a wooden one, but you'll notice that it's exactly the same build using a different palette, and it has a wonderful effect. Using different types of wood allows you to highlight the skin, the hat, and the dress equally so that you can tell which is which. Next up is a human statue, and I'll be doing a small tutorial at the end to show you how you would go about making one of these. Again, it's all about the use of the staircases, and it's the proportions that are important that need to stay the same, but the position is what's editable in that statue. Next up is a little gargoyle or dragon, depending on how you see it. This could be very useful on top of a large skyscraper or outside a mansion, and we'll come back to that later. This is build me like one of your French girls position. This is another human statue, and I will go over how you make these a bit later on and where you could use this as an example. Next up is a pretty cool little serpent that's clearly breathing fire. However, this could be used as a fountain, and I will show you the example just after I've shown you the rest of it. You can see that the snake shape is made up of purely the use of staircases. I cannot stress enough how much intricate detail is needed, and staircases will be your primary block. For these examples, you can use the build me like your French girl in front of a cool little fountain face, and you could have a staircase that goes around the back, or with the serpent you could literally have water pouring out the mouth into a fountain out the front. It depends how you want to use these examples. Next up we have a pretty cool little lion, and you can see that the mane is a different colour to the rest of it. It's a little bit out of proportion, the body is particularly small, but the head is what's important on these. And you may be wondering, what would you do with a lion like this? It seems a little bit odd to just have a statue of it lying around. But if you made a pyramid or a desert build, it could be a really good way to introduce the person that's looking at it to the build, so it doesn't look so lonely. These things are great to accompany builds, to complete them, to fill a space and look good at the same time. So next up we now have a horse with a bow and arrow. It's not a centaur because it's still got the mane and the tail and everything, but that's just being pernickety. The actual statue is pretty good. I don't know where exactly you would use this, but Pearl did a pretty good job of distinguishing the top and the bottom with the different coloured woods. Perhaps it would be good in an elvish design or something of that sort, maybe inside a forest, much like the witch one earlier, and all of those staircases in that build make it look fantastic. Now here is the thinker. I'll give you an example of where you can use this, but on its own, it actually looks pretty cool. It wouldn't be out of place in a town or something like that. We've actually had to use little crevices for the eyes. And here's the example of the mansion. The mansion itself looks pretty good, but having two statues at the gate, much like real life, just gives you something to introduce you to the build. If the mansion was on its own, it might feel a little bit lonely. Next up is another little serpent, but it is laying down. Now, it's not as good as the others because it is made out of just cobblestone. Perhaps if some of the other bits such as the tail and the body were made of other things, it would look better, much like this one, which is an actual dragon or gargoyle depending on what you want to see. Using the different types, like the horns is made of quartz, and there's a little bit of stone brick and some glass in there, you can distinguish the body parts a lot easier. And at the back here there's a wooden one to just further that point, that you can just distinguish body parts using different colours. I feel that these are really good little statues, and you could make them bigger if you wanted to. So now we're coming on to a few more human designs. These are again the same proportions as we've seen in the previous designs, but in a different position. And here's one where you go fishing. It's all very sort of fun, and that's what we're going to be doing in a second. I'm going to teach you how to make these human ones. Oh dear, he's died. You can literally do anything with these small human ones because they're very, very simple to make, as long as you can kind of see where you go wrong with any sort of proportions. If an arm's too long, it's going to look a bit off. But if you just sort of keep to a standard, you can put them in any position you want and have a really good looking human statue. So all of those ones could be placed in like a coliseum, they could be placed around town, outside houses, mansions, anything like that. And this is where we're now going to build one human statue. They're pretty easy to do. All you need to do is grab as many grey blocks as possible, including the staircases, slabs, anything like that. You can also use wood, but as you may have noticed, you do need a block with the staircases involved, otherwise you won't be able to get those intricate details. We're going to be making a human with his leg up on a rock and he's like pointing out into the distance, so just making a quick rock on the floor here, and we're going to determine the size of our human through one leg. Once we've done that, it dictates the rest of the build, and that's pretty important. If you have one limb that's too long, or the legs are longer than the arms and that kind of thing, it looks really strange. So it's one block up, staircase, and we've got a nice bent leg, and that dictates how far down the other leg goes. So this is the size of the bottom half, so we now know roughly how far up we need to make the torso. It's easier to replace normal blocks with staircases afterwards to give it more shape than it is to start with them. But since I've sort of done this a few times already, I kind of know where they need to be. So I'm using staircases to make his hand point out into the distance at an angle that would be more appealing than having staircases or blocks. It would be too steep if you use staircases, or too straight if you use normal ones. On the other side, I'm now going to try and get a good shape of him putting his hand on his hip. And I think that's just about got it right, and now we have to do the one that will never ever look good, which is the head. Getting a head right in Minecraft is difficult, so we have to do this sort of donut shape with a few blocks and a few staircases, and to make it look a little less weird, you make a bulbous nose, much like a villager. If it looks slightly odd, then it doesn't need to look normal, if that makes sense. So by having an extra large nose, it makes the rest of the proportions seem a bit more normal. So now we've kind of got the body of it down, you can go ahead and make any alterations that you see fit. You may want to add some thickness on the torso or on the back or anything like that, but for the most part, I think this looks pretty good. I think down here you could change any sort of body part to be a different type of blocks so that you can distinguish body parts, but on a human it's not as necessary. If you wanted it to look like it was wearing a t-shirt, for example, you could change that bit into cobblestone, and then in wearing trousers you could do the same. So that's pretty much it on how to make it. You can edit single blocks to try and make it have a little more shape or a little less shape, but overall that's roughly how you go about making one of these human statues. Now, it is very different depending on what statue you want to make, but trying to get the shape of a body part correct and then start making everything else in the same proportion is the way that I would go about making it. If something looks wrong, there's no shame in just editing that part, but you need to make sure that that very first body part, whether it's the length of a dragon body, a leg, a head, anything, that one needs to be what you are after before you can complete the rest. Okay, that's enough everybody. Thank you very much for watching. If you want a download to all of these statues that were here, they will be in the description. Compliments of Pearlescent Moon. Thank you very much for watching everyone. Goodbye!